In Southern California, the Woolsey Fire is responsible for 2 deaths and has destroyed more than 400 buildings near Los Angeles.
Strong winds there are making it difficult for firefighters to gain control. Our Jamie Yuccas is in Malibu, which is still under mandatory evacuation. Jamie, we can just see the destruction where you are. What else have you seen over the last couple of days?
Well, I think this is really the story, and it's also about tight-knit communities and neighbors now helping neighbors. As you said, this area of Malibu still under mandatory evacuation, and that's because firefighters are so concerned that hot spots could end up flaring back up, the embers could end up being picked up by those winds, traveling to other places, and that more homes could be lost, and that's their biggest fear. In a neighborhood like this one, as you said, you know, it's so striking. My producer and I, when we walked up here, said, can't you just picture this door being your door or your grandparents' front door? And that's what a lot of people in this neighborhood said, that it was older people in this community who lost their homes here in Point Dume, if people are familiar, near Zuma Beach in Malibu, which is kind of a popular place for people to go, especially tourists. So we've seen this over and over again. Neighbors helping neighbor, as I said, especially in places like this. We watch boats come in because the roads are cut off here. The Pacific Coast Highway is still cut off. So people are actually bringing in boats from Santa Monica or Oxnard and bringing them to Malibu, things like water, medications, baby wipes, that kind of thing, so that people can have some sense of normalcy as they're trying to pick up the pieces here. There are also homes right across the street, right next door, untouched by the fire. I was asked why some burned and others didn't, and I was told some of these homes that were older were primarily made of wood and also had easements and different areas within the house that had a lot of brush within it. So if an ember caught that, these went up very, very quickly. Other people in this neighborhood actually stayed behind and, as you heard before, were watering their homes with garden hoses, trying to make sure they were protected. So we've seen people like that in this neighborhood now, even though the neighborhood's under mandatory evacuation. Some people have been coming in by boat to check on their house. And once they get here, a lot of them want to stay to make sure if the fires flare back up, that they're prepared, they have the hoses ready to go, and they could protect their property.
Now, I know that fighting this fire has been a round-the-clock operation, but it's still only 30% contained. Why is this fire so difficult?
Well, I can tell you, if anybody has looked at the terrain of Southern California, you have the valley on one side, the mountainous terrain, and then you get to the coastline. And this fire, from what we were told, started on one side of the hillside, quickly with those 40 to 50 mile per hour wind gusts, traveled over the canyons and the mountainous areas and went straight to the coastline. The interesting thing about this neighborhood in Malibu is that if you talk to residents who have lived here a long, long time, they say, well, of course, Malibu has to be prepared for fire. This fire did what a lot of fires have done, where it comes over the mountainside. Now, the thing that is interesting about this fire is fire had never reached the neighborhood I'm standing in before of Point Dume. It had usually been able to stay by the PCH. It would run down the mountain, the Pacific Coast Highway. It never jumped it before to this specific area. So there were other areas along the coast that may have seen spot fires at times during other fires, but this fire has been very unusual. And firefighters themselves said, I've lived here for 20, 30 years. I've done other fires in that area, and I've never seen devastation like this. I never saw a fire move that quickly to the coastline and take over some of these neighborhoods like it did. And that's the real concern, you know, both Anne Marie and Vlad, is that these Santa Ana winds keep kicking back up, and we have that notice in effect until now Wednesday. They keep delaying it a little bit here as we're checking in. While it doesn't appear windy right now where I'm standing, in some of the other spots in the canyons, you have those strong gusts of winds, 30, 40, 50 miles per hour, and all it takes is just one spark, a little bit of vegetation, and that fire can run. The biggest concern now, because you have 30% containment, is that something will spark outside the containment line. That means you have new vegetation that can quickly start fire and run a whole new fire. So that would be the worst case scenario on a day like today. We're just going to have to watch and see.
Jamie, I want to ask you about the Southern California Edison, the utility company. What are you learning about the fact that they may have told state regulators that there was an outage just 2 minutes before the fire was reported last Thursday? What are you hearing?
So there's a couple different pieces of this. As you just stated, they did tell state regulators that information, that they had an outage. One of the things we know is that we talked to CAL FIRE. They will not say specifically that the fire started because of that outage. So they're going to have to investigate it. So that's at that point in the investigation. I can tell you other large fires that have occurred here in California. You may remember some of the fires to the north last year where there was several acres burned and many, many lives lost, were started by either outages or transformers sparking something and it quickly taking off within some of the brush. When you talk to firefighters, even though they will not confirm at this point that that's what started it, there is a concern that some of these substations have way too much brush around them. Everybody's supposed to be able to clear their property within 100 to 200 feet. And in some of these places, it's up to the county to enforce the law of how far it is, and it's kind of dependent on the area. So if the brush is not being cleared, that's where you can end up having a problem when these transponders or outages occur. It can quickly spark, as we've been talking about, and then if the conditions are right, it can run. So they're going to be taking a close look at that. The other piece of this is there's a new law that took effect, and so kind of the devastating part of this for customers is their bills could actually go up if, in fact, the utility company is found to be at fault here, because this new law indicates that if people, if the utility company sustains damages from lawsuits and that kind of thing and piles up a lot of losses, they can pass it on to the customer so that they don't go bankrupt.
Well, that would be insult to injury if, the outage has something to do with the fire. But listen, some of the most heart-wrenching images that we've seen so far from the fires have been of animals either left behind or trying desperately to escape. And there was an image of this giraffe that I guess everyone knows there, Stanley the giraffe in Malibu. It really stirred up, there were celebrities tweeting about Stanley and what's going on with him. People are concerned. What can you tell us about Stanley and what's happening with some of the other animals?
Well, Stanley is kind of an infamous giraffe. If you go on Instagram, very, very popular. As you said, a number of celebrities tweeting about it. I can tell you I once visited this location, the Miami Safari area. It's kind of Malibu Wines is what it's called. And you go in with friends and different things, and this is a prominent piece of that. I wasn't able to actually meet Stanley the giraffe because Kylie Jenner was there. He's been a very popular character for a number of years in this area for celebrities to throw birthday parties and that kind of thing and meet him. What happened at the Malibu Safari is that they have a protocol in place. They have a veterinarian on staff who's been there more than 30 years. As I said, fires have been known to come through Malibu before. So they had a protocol in place that if a fire was coming, they would let out their horses and some of the other domesticated animals into a large pasture area and allow them to move around near a lake and where brush was cleared basically down to dirt. Now, if the brush is cleared down to dirt, the idea is the fire will stop wherever it hits dirt. So the idea is the animals would be safe in that area near the water. What happened with animals like Stanley the giraffe is that they had to keep them in their enclosures because these are exotic animals and many of them have to be tranquilized, but they followed the protocol that they have in place for fires like this, and supposedly every animal on that property is okay at this point in time. I can tell you some of the other headlines being made around animals is that there are 13 collared mountain lions in this region. 8 of them are fine. Their collars are working and pinging. There are other mountain lions within that may also be okay. Their collars just may not be working at this point in time. So biologists are going to try to track them down and figure out if they survived the fire or not. But yes, I know there's been a lot of social media kind of tweeting about Stanley the giraffe and the other animals up there. It sounds like they followed their protocol and everything's all right. Unlike some of the images you've seen of ranchers taking horses and alpacas and that kind of thing to the beach to try to get to safety or in trailers to get out of here.
Yeah, it's some tough. Well, it's good news at least about the giraffe and the others on that facility there, and hopefully some good news for other animals as well. Jamie, thank you so much.
Yeah.